Welcome back to the Sina Good Health Podcast. Today we've got a special Sina True Love podcast. I have my wife, Tori Sina, with me. So today we're going to talk about, what makes a relationship strong, like how it can kind of boost other aspects of your life, and just kind of using our story as an example. So Tori, you want to start off with talking about how we met?
Sure. So how we met, I had just moved to the cities. I had been there for about 3 days. I was living with a woman named Sue, and she had a daughter. And her daughter had told me about this dating website that might be a good place to start meeting people. And even if you weren't going to meet somebody, it was for long-term relationship, it was a good place to kind of meet some people, get acquainted with the city and whatnot, so I thought I would give it a try. So the night that she told me about it, I downloaded the OkCupid app, and I messaged Alex, and he was actually the first person I messaged. But as soon as I messaged him, I almost instantly regretted it because I thought he was way too cute, and I made too big of a leap, and it just wasn't going to happen. So I started messaging other people, and I got a couple hits back. And then I had actually had a date with another guy, and then Alex messaged back. And I remember calling my mom because he was the one that I was really very much interested in. And I reached out to my mom and was like, "Mom, he's gorgeous. He wrote back. Why did he do that? What am I supposed to do? I wasn't planning on this." And she was like, "Well, just be yourself." And I'm like, "Mom, I've been single for I don't know how long. There's no way." And she's like, "Just be yourself." And it's like, "Okay, Mom." So I was kind of left to fend for myself. So I messaged him and said that I had suggested maybe ice cream and somewhere that I thought was the middle of where...
Between the two of us,
distance-wise. Well, it turns out it was way closer to me than it was to him. Like I said, I was new to the cities and hadn't been there very long. And we decided to meet for ice cream. And then I found out he was a personal trainer, and I was like, oh no, he's going to see me stuff my face with ice cream. I thought it had been over before it even began. So for our first date, I ended up getting there late because the Cold Stone had just switched locations. It was across the interstate, and I had no idea where I was going, so I just plugged it into my Google Maps, and I was going to the wrong place. So I eventually found it, but I was 15 to 20 minutes late, like I said, and then when I walked in, I saw him, and ooh, he's cute. And I gave him a hug, and I was like, oh no, I don't know if I should give him a hug. But I'm giving him a hug anyway.
Very long hug.
It was a very long hug. It was longer than probably what was socially acceptable, but I was like, he's a good hugger, he smells good, we're going to just embrace this. And then I went to order my ice cream, and I got gummy bears in mine. And the reason that's significant is just because my first journal entry after I met Alex was...
We'll get to that.
Okay.
There's more,
but we'll get that.
So when you tried to pay for the ice cream, what happened?
Yeah, so when I tried to pay for the ice cream, my card was declined, and I knew exactly why. So I was buying some Christmas presents, because this was the week before Christmas, at Scheels, and I kept swiping my debit card at Scheels because it wasn't reading it. And I had asked the cashier if it was reading it, and he said it was. Or it wasn't, and then I asked if, these charges, were going through. He said, no, they're not reading it, and then it finally read it. Well, when I looked at my bank account, soon after this decline, then I saw that they had gone through. So anyway.
She got charged 8 times for the same thing.
So I went out to the car and tried to grab some of my extra money that I keep in my vehicle for emergencies and whatnot, but...
In the meantime, I paid for her ice cream because I am a gentleman.
Yes, and then I went back in after I scrounged up my change from my, cigarette holder, because my sisters had helped me move, and they found my cash stash in my car. So I had change, and then I went in and tried to pay for it, and I dropped my change all over the floor. My change, my nickels, my dignity, it was all over the floor. And then I'm like, this is not going well. So then Alex had already paid for my ice cream, which made me feel more like an idiot. And then
I helped her pick up the change.
He helped me pick
again,
up
because I am a gentleman.
Right. And then I was like, I'm going to have to dazzle him with conversation because that's all I have left to offer for this date. So then we sat down and we ended up talking for like 3 hours. It was a good time. I was able to redeem myself. And then when
the
store closed, we went out to the car and he walked me to my car.
I drove you to your car.
You drove me to my car. And then...
But we kept talking in my car because neither one of us wanted it to end, so we just kept talking and then...
And then do you want to finish the rest of the story?
Keep going.
Okay, all right. So then he drove me to my car, and where I was parked, so it was kind of in this strip mall that kind of wrapped around.
Yeah, so she had parked like kind of behind the store, so I just pulled up next to her car and we were just talking for a while, and I was trying to look for an excuse to kiss her. But then she noticed in one of the apartment buildings adjacent to the parking lot, there was this guy standing in the window, like staring down at us. Like he was, so the window and then the curtains, and he was in front of his curtains, like pressed up against the window.
It was very intimidating, but he was looking at us because we were the only ones there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he thought we were causing trouble or whatnot. And then we saw some people by the dumpsters. And I just had my, face plastered to the glass because I was like, oh my gosh, we gotta get out of here. I gotta get to my car. I don't know how to do that. It's right next to me, but I don't know how to do that. I was just freaking out, and all the while, Alex is trying to kiss me. And it's kind of hard for someone to kiss you when your face is plastered against the glass. So he tried to get me to relax. So then he laid me down in his lap, and then I looked up at him. And what exactly did I say, honey?
She said, "You're just so pretty. I'm looking up at your nose hairs and all I can think is you're just so pretty."
And that was the nail in the coffin for the date. So I was like, I'm going to just go because I'm like, I can't come back from that. And then I started to leave, and then he pulled me in, and then he kissed me, and I'm like, huzzah! Like, I was so excited. But I had been rehearsing lines in my bedroom before the date because I knew he was incredibly good looking. And I didn't want to fumble. And then, of course, as the date went on, like, the plan just completely botched. It didn't work well at all. Needless to say, I did not have nose hairs written into my cue cards when I was practicing lines. So it's something we still joke about to this day. And my first, entry when I was doing journaling and whatnot that night, it was called Nose Hairs and Gummy Bears, which has a lot of significance to us. So that's how we had our first date and our first interactions. And
so how would you say our relationship has grown over time?
That's a good question, Alex. I think the way that I've seen our relationship develop over time is, I think at first when you first meet somebody and there's like the physical attraction and it's just all about that exciting love, like, everything's so exciting, so new, so, you kind of want to experience it all at once. And then as you go on, you kind of get out of that honeymoon stage. And I remember when we kind of crossed out of that honeymoon stage, because there were things that I could just kind of feel internally. I was letting my guard down about some things, that I could be my, true self with you and let you know some of my, more inner demons, things that I was struggling with. Like for a good portion of my life, I've suffered with the anxiety, depression disorder, and I know this was something that I hid from Alex, pretty early on in our relationship, just because I didn't know what he would think. I didn't know if it would be too much, things like that. And then Alex was telling me how he was diagnosed with Asperger's, and I kind of figured out early on that we had to really, communicate. We really had to work together to kind of figure out how we were going to balance out these, either mental health issues or learning disabilities or whatever that we needed to kind of figure out. So I think knowing what we were getting into at the beginning, I think that really helped us to kind of grow and develop and really start doing, research and stuff early on about how we could communicate with each other and be a good partner for each other. And I think over the years have developed too. I've seen us, develop more from like just individual people to really working as a team. I think, in almost all aspects of our life, we're approaching things together. We talk it through and figure stuff out. So as our relationship has developed, I just really see us working as a team, and developing that trust. That trust is there, and it's so important in a relationship, because if you don't have the trust, it crumbles. So I've seen that trust develop, and I would say now we're in probably the strongest place we've ever been. I think we've gone from maybe being, at least for me, being afraid to disclose some of my inner demons to actually, being kind of excited to either talk about them or almost feeling the need to talk about them because Alex can help me, maybe identify how I'm feeling. And I know that's something that, Alex sometimes struggles with too, is that he doesn't sometimes know what he's feeling. He might say, I'm feeling, this way, but not really able to kind of identify a feeling with that.
Or the way I put it too is like, I have a sensation, but I don't know how to put words to it. So that can be tricky sometimes. And I'm not sure if that's a me thing or an autism thing or what. When I was talking with your mom about emotions and stuff, like she talks about this wheel of emotions, and like there's the more basic ones and the more complicated ones, and it's like it takes a while to learn to recognize all those. So when at one point you were taking some communications classes and you said you were learning a lot, you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So one of the reasons I got into learning about communication was, a big reason was learning about Alex's Asperger's. And, Alex was the second boyfriend I've had in my life and will ever have. But it's just, with my relationship with my first boyfriend, the communication just wasn't there. There were times where, we weren't able to have those conversations that went on for hours and things like that. And when we were together, it was just kind of more awkward and not comfortable. So I really needed to kind of take a step back and think about, well, what am I contributing to the communication in our relationship? So I decided to take some communication classes, interpersonal communication and things like that. And it really taught me that I wasn't very good at dealing with conflict. So I'm somebody who, I don't like a lot of conflict. If there's conflict, I usually shy away from it. It's not my thing. I'm not comfortable around it. In high school, even doing like debate, that was incredibly uncomfortable for me. It's just not my cup of tea. I don't like it. So when, in a relationship, you have to be, open to the idea of having conflict with your partner. It's going to happen. And we had learned in our classes that if you're not arguing in your relationship or you're not having some conflict, then one of you is settling. Either the person's not expressing their needs, or their needs aren't being met, or something like that. And that really was eye-opening for me, because I had always thought, well, if you didn't fight in a relationship, that was a good thing. And that's not necessarily true. So it really opened my eyes, and it made me kind of analyze myself, like, okay, taking Alex out of the picture, how do I deal with conflict when I'm upset or hurt or scared or nervous or confused? Like, how do I deal with conflict? And how do I deal with my feelings in general? And it just was very eye-opening for me, because I realized that I didn't have the best coping skills. I approached, when I was in a stressful situation, more to venting to people. And, me venting my issues onto them was how I was able to kind of talk it through and help myself. But in our communication class, we learned that venting is two ways, and it's not really beneficial for each party. So for the person who is doing the venting, you are the one who's like rehashing the issue and bringing up stirred emotions and things like that. And for the person who's receiving the venting, you're kind of getting the dumped on feeling. And I noticed I did this a lot in our relationship early on, and it would affect Alex. I could tell, like, after sometimes we talked, like, I vented, and I didn't necessarily feel better, because I feel like, again, I had rehashed it, and I could tell it had an effect on Alex. So I really had to do some, soul searching and figure out how I can deal with conflict. And one of the things that I really love about Alex is he is so eager to, be constantly learning about himself and working on himself. And I love that about him so much, because there's so many people out there who are like, nope, I am okay the way I am. You're not going to change me. You're not going to change my mind, and are just so close-minded. But for the people who are close-minded, you don't get change that way. And yes, you can be stubborn about some things, but for the bigger things and working on improving yourself, having an open mind is really big. I mean, you're not going to change anything out there until you change it up here and in here. That's where it starts. So, I guess to go back to your question, Alex, just really had to, in these communication classes, really address how I was dealing with conflict, whether it was conflict in our relationship or conflict elsewhere, and how I was dealing with conflict really affected Alex, and how I could really be a better partner for him when it comes to that. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you also, you talked to me about, when you were taking these classes, you said that your mom and I both had really good communication skills. So I wanted to think about for myself, like, so what did I do to learn communication? And that also kind of goes into this other question. So we were both shy early in life. So how do you go about developing social skills and communication skills and all that? I don't know if you want me to go or you go.
Yeah, no, I can go first on that. So for some people who maybe don't know, so I'm originally from up north, a little town called Ada, and I went to school, I was going to go for nursing first in Winona, Minnesota, which is about 7 hours away from home. Nobody else who I graduated with was going to Winona. There was a girl a couple of years before me who had gone, but that was about it. I didn't really know anybody from the area at all. My dad had kind of introduced me to the school, and I kind of fell in love with the town. So I went there, and, for somebody who was a shy, small town kid, Winona was a real eye-opener. I feel like, when you grow up in a small town, there's a lot of things that you're naive about, whether that's, drugs, gangs, how manipulative people can be, or even how to even, present yourself in a bigger setting. I mean, for example, if you're wanting to get a job, like, getting a job in a bigger city, you have to approach it differently than you would at, like, the Ada country store. I mean, you are learning different things, and there were a lot of things that I did not know when I went to college, like everyone else. But I learned very early on that I, wanted to develop friendships with people, because that was really going to help me get through college. But I didn't know anybody, so in order for me to develop these friendships, I had to come out of my shell. I had to be open. I mean, people aren't going to just go over the shy kid in the cafeteria and invite you over to go to Taco Bell. I mean, you have to be the one to kind of put yourself out there. So I think I learned that early on. And I really kind of sought out people that had similar interests to me. One of my friends that I had in college, her name was Tess, and she loved to sing. And we had met through, some mutual friends and things like that, and I really felt connected to her through that. One of my friends, Lisa, who I'm still friends with, she was down the hall from me, and she heard me singing karaoke in my room, in my dorm room, which I didn't realize that my voice carried that far. And she said that I had a really good voice, and she wanted to know if I wanted to go to Taco Bell. And we've been friends ever since. So it's just, just even being myself and kind of, putting myself out there a little bit. And, you're never going to grow when you stay inside your comfort zone. It just doesn't happen. So for me, I know I really had to put myself out of my comfort zone to find people who were going to be in my tribe. And I think, Alex, you've had to put yourself out of your comfort zone too to be able to make friends as well and make developments with your life.
Yeah, my very broad advice is like Tori was saying, doing some kind of activity or sport. So that's a good way to make friends, just because you have, and for myself, I found it was easier to talk with people when there's something to do instead of just hanging out. So I've done theater, so you've got the play to do, or doing film projects, you've got that. Sports, you've got rec leagues or sports teams if you're in school. And then I was partway through high school, I got into weightlifting and mixed martial arts. So those are two different overlapping just cultures, usually guys, but women too, just to bond with people that care about fitness or fighting or whatever. So that's good. And then the other part is just, I read a lot about psychology and social skills and stuff, and that's not that, I'm not sure how it translated into actually, because I don't, you don't just read, okay, on page 4, you follow this diagram of how to talk to people, and then you go and talk to somebody. But I think if you just, it's it makes me think of when you're trying to learn Spanish or just some other language, they tell you to watch Spanish TV and listen to Spanish music and just kind of immerse yourself in it, and you kind of just get immersed in that culture and kind of pick it up that way too. So you're not consciously thinking, okay, she said this, I should respond with X, Y, and Z, clever, witty response, and then we are friends, yay! It's but I did read a thing about because people talk about with after college it's harder to make friends, and I think it's because you need, and I don't know what the number is, but you need X number of interactions with somebody, and when you're kind of clumped together with somebody in school, then that kind of happens a lot easier than, if you need to go out for drinks or whatever with somebody 150 times before you're friends. So, but because the other part of that question though is that's how to make friends, but then there's the communication skills too, because there's a level where you need a level of competence in a conversation, and I'm not sure what the answer is for that, because for me, I did a lot in college. I did a lot of getting college credit when I was in high school, so I was only in college for 2.5 years, and my teachers talked about, I had one teacher in particular that I had my first semester freshman year, and then a year and a half later, so the spring of my sophomore year, and she and I really bonded, and she pointed out just how much I had grown in that span. So, but then even after that, it's post-college, I know I grew a lot, as a person, fitness-wise, socially, just adult life skills, a whole bunch of different components. So, Tori was saying, the self-improvement thing is really important to me. So I don't know what to tell you guys, but it's not something that's gonna just happen, but so there's not an overnight process, and there are books that I can recommend, but it's also just, there's a level where you need to be meet a certain threshold, but then like I was realizing my social skills are good enough, and if a conversation's not going well, it's not necessarily on me, because not everybody is good at conversations. So it's, and there's not a definite, you know, this person's the reason a conversation's not going well, but if you're trying to engage with somebody and they're giving you the fine, sure, yeah, it's cold, like, there's not a lot to build on, and not everybody sounds mean, not everybody has interesting things going on in their life or knows how to translate that. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but
well, and I think another important thing to learn about communication too is it's not, you know, there's no end point where it's like, oh, my communication is good enough, I'm going to stop learning. You know, as you get older and you develop more relationships with people, you're going to have different ways that you're going to have to learn how to communicate with others. So as an adult, you know, before you have, you know, kids and whatever, you're you know, communicating with friends and coworkers and things like that who have other, you know, life events going on, and then you get married, and then you might have kids, and then you might have to interact with, you know, kids' parents who have different ways to communicate. So you're always learning more ways to communicate by the relationships that you're encountering. So you're constantly having to build on it. So, and you know, the communication methods that you use for one person are not going to be the same, you know, communication methods that you're using for other people. I mean, communication doesn't work that way. I mean, the way you talk to your 2-year-old isn't going to be the same way that you talk to your boss. I mean, I would hope not, but but you know, as you're meeting more people and you're developing new, you know, more relationships, you're learning more and different ways to communicate, and it's important to kind of be open-minded about building on those kinds of things. You know, for example, like with us getting married recently and with in-laws and things like that, learning to, you know, build that relationship more and communicate. You know, you're communicating differently than you were early on, and learning to build things like that. And so I know that's one way that I've been trying to develop communication and things like that. So it's a continuous process.
yeah.
There's not really a cutoff. I mean, you're consistently,
Yeah.
you know, working on your communication.
And the word that pops up to me is awareness, because you need a level of, like, I'm talking with this person, did it go well? And I mean, it's probably easiest to start with post conversation, like thinking about how that went and what I could have done and said and whatever. And I assume people do that naturally on some level, because, you know, you always think about, oh, I could have had that come back and it would have been so good, and just either really funny or like nailed him if it's an argument or whatever.
Or not said nose hairs.
Yeah. So, do you want to talk about like how you and I fight? And because for us, it's not your stereotypical TV like name calling and yelling. It's much more on the discussion side.
Mm-hmm. I think one important thing to note, that when Alex and I fight or have an argument, we really care about the other person's feelings and care about what they're, you know, what we're going to be able to bring to this, you know, argument or conflict, and what we're going to be able to get out of it. So one thing that you know, there's so many things I love about Alex, but he has never raised his voice at me. And I've never raised my voice at him. We've never been, you know, physical, anything like that. I think, and we've never name called either. Never name called, swore, anything like that. And it's not, you know, to brag or say anything like that. It's just, I think Alex and I just have like the utmost respect for the other person. So when we are entering into a conflict, like, yes, you know, we might be, you know, have high emotions and things like that, but we, you know, if we're going to be addressing the conflict, we definitely make sure that our, emotions have simmered to a place where the argument or conflict is going to be constructive rather than destructive. So, if we get into something heated, one of the best things I've learned is, just kind of pick your moment that works. So when I had conflict early on, I really like to, dig in, have the last word, da-da-da-da-da, and, it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good for me, maybe a millisecond, and it definitely didn't feel good all around. And that was one of the things I had to address in my communications class, like, how do I address conflict? And I found out that I would like to get into stuff heated in the moment and things like that, and I needed to just take a step back and really evaluate why I was feeling that way. Like, yes, I'm, pissed, I'm hurt, I'm upset, but like, why are you hurt and upset? I think one thing is really being able to identify how you're feeling in a conflict is important. Because if you aren't able to identify how you're really feeling in that conflict, you're not going to be able to solve it. You're not going to be able to come to some sort of resolution. I mean, the reason, your partner isn't, your partner might not be mad because you threw a lamp. They might be upset that, they want to get to the core of the problem, I guess is what I'm saying. So just really being able to identify how you're feeling and being able to work that out constructively with your partner, I think is incredibly important.
Yeah, I definitely remember some of our, and I may not remember what the discussion was about, but I remember earlier in the relationship having those discussions, and then like after however long, then I finally figured out like what that core issue is, and it's like, and it took all of that just to get to the core issue, and then it's like, okay, now we can actually start to deal with it.
So something that I know helps me with conflict is if I'm really, ranting and raving about something, I usually go and, type it out. Excuse me. I will usually go type or write it out or whatever, get it on paper or in writing or something. And then I might take a break, I might read, I might watch a movie, just to kind of calm down. And then I come back to it and then I read it and it's like, wow, I was really upset. And normally from what I'm writing, I'm able to see like that I'm really narrowing in on this one thing. Like, oh, I was ranting about this one part of the argument or conflict or whatever. And it's like, I probably should focus on that because that seems to be the thing that I'm most upset about. And then kind of analyze, okay, why was I so upset about that, and then just think about that. And then that is when, when I've had time to sit down, reflect about what I was really mad at or mad about, that's when I will go approach Alex and ask him if he's ready to talk. One thing that we've really developed in our relationship is learning, to kind of, like, it's okay to take a step back and say, I'm not ready to talk right now. Or I'm in a really, not great mood. Maybe we should do this and come back and talk about it later. And I think that gives us time to sit and reflect how we're really thinking about things. And you're really, preventing, damage, because words, I mean, you can't take them back. I mean, you can say that you forgive the person or whatever, but once they're out there, the damage is done. So I think what Alex and I have really tried to do is just try to prevent that hurt by just, analyzing how we're feeling and bringing something to the, table that's going to be constructive and we're going to get a good solution out of.
Yeah, to me it's sounding like, and I live it, so it's, but it sounds like we're trying to resolve emotions without using emotions, maybe. Like we're going to talk about why we're upset or angry or hurt, but not by taking that break and kind of realizing it. Like, one thing that I've realized really early on in life that I think is applied to all of my self-development stuff is there's a difference between your brain, or like you and what your brain is telling you, and that also applies to feelings. And it's like, I think a lot of people, I guess I don't know how many people, but it feels like people don't even get to that level. And without that realization, you can't get a lot of maturity and wisdom and all the other stuff. So that's like that's a first step. But that, just saying that sentence makes people think it's all like woo woo and whatever. So
I think something that's important to note too, Alex, is that when, in our relationship, we might be competitive people with like sports or games or whatever, because I'll say it, we're competitive. I will say that right now. But I don't think we're competitive with each other, like in our relationship, to be like, ha, I got the last word, or I was right. Or like, because I think the way that we approach our relationship is definitely as a team. So we both want to win. We both want to have that benefit. I mean, yes, we can be, sassy and whatever, but not to the point where we're hurting each other's feelings. I think in that respect, we want to come to a healthy, resolution. And I think that's honestly really helped our relationship and, our marriage. And it's so incredibly important because it makes me feel at the end of the day that my husband really respects me. And I think at the end of the day, he feels that I respect him as a man and a husband. And I think that's incredibly important, to have that respect for your relationship, because it's sacred. Your relationship is, something that you've invested in. And I think to approach it with love and respect is one of the best things you can do for your relationship.
yeah, like I'm reminded of, I don't remember where this is from, but it's something along the lines of like, do you want to win the argument or the fight, or do you want to have like the happy, healthy relationship? Because it's like, you can only put those points in one or the other. So like Tori was saying, like if you want to get that last word in the argument, like, no, you're stupid. It's like, okay, what does that do for you? Versus if you can have that conversation and be like, just focusing on actually resolving the issue instead of just getting those jabs in, So, yeah. Another thing that I know for myself, I don't know if you had to overcome it, I think you did too, is when early on, we were afraid of hurting the other person's feelings. So, like Tori said, in one of her classes, she was learning that if people aren't fighting, then at least one of you is really unhappy. And I know it was hard for me to go into a conversation that I knew was going to upset you. And you had told me, like, I need to, deal with it. Like, just, do it anyway, like, because we need that honesty, and, like, we need to fully resolve the issues and not just put stuff under the rug. So.
Yeah. Well, and like I said earlier, I mean, if you're not stepping out of your comfort zone, I mean, you're not going to get anywhere. And, I mean, depending on who you are, conflict might be, really natural to you. For other people, it is unnatural. It's not, it's not wanted. It's, but I think when you're in a relationship and making these kind of investment, I mean, I look at our marriage, and our relationship that we had before as an investment. Where you invest your love is where you invest your life. And I really look at it as an investment, and, and not in, numerical terms, but I'm talking about like just you're investing a lot of time and energy and emotion and feelings and all of that. And then, it's a long time to be with somebody and build that up. So you want to have it be as, loved and cared for as anything else. So.
Yeah, and like that raises a good point too about like how I'm just thinking about like in your pop culture movies and whatever, you've got, relationships aren't always going to be easy and 100% getting along and stuff like
Amen.
that investment is a good word, because it's like, it's not going to be easy all the time, but you can put the time and the work in and have those hard conversations to have a really good relationship. And that's, I think, where people don't see the payoff necessarily, maybe.
Right.
Like, let's throw like Jordan Peterson talked about, like, there's somebody came up with, like, there's a ratio of positive to negative interactions that you have. Like, yeah, you know where I'm going with this. So
Yep.
So it's like, if you have fewer than like 5 to 1 or 7 or something of like a positive interaction versus a negative interaction, then that relationship's doomed. But if it's over, like, I want to say the sweet spot is 7 to 15, and then higher than that, so there's like only good interactions and like never negative, like that's not good either, because like we were saying, somebody's unhappy. So you want that, and it's also bad because it's like, there's no one, if somebody's just always agreeing with you, and you don't want that, because you want somebody that kind of challenges you.
And I think at the end of the day, it's just important to evaluate, kind of where you are as a couple. Are you feeling happy? How much of your time are you spending arguing or whatnot? And it's not to say that, like, if you are charting or have an Excel spreadsheet and be like, we had 8 fights today, that means that we're sitting in this or this place. I mean, you really have to kind of, and some days, honestly, are going to be worse than others. Some days are going to be really, really hard to, love your partner or whatever. But I think the important thing is, if you're wanting to keep making that investment in your relationship, you're really going to have to start evaluating, once like Alex said, once the payoff isn't worth it anymore.
Right. Yeah, because I was going to have us talk about, like, different, because you're talking about, like, it's just making me think about, like, with phases of our relationship, like we talked about early on, and then there was a stretch of a few years where we were doing long distance. So if you want to talk about some of the challenges that came from that, and
Sure.
how we handled that.
Sure. So I would say one of the biggest things that I struggled with, there were a couple things. My first thing is I was just like, in the beginning of the relationship, you're like physically just enamored with your partner, and, Alex was, a hunk and a half. So, like, I just was like, oh, I want to spend more time with him, I want to hug him, I want to kiss him, I want to, do all these things. And of course, he was one of my first relationships too, so I felt like I almost had like that schoolgirl, like, I'm 14 and I'm dating my crush kind of thing, where you just kind of become enamored. So that was something that I was kind of dealing with. Maybe not something that you were thinking of that might have been a struggle, but it's a struggle for me. But with the long distance, I mean, it's not something that you can just, you don't have that, satisfaction like right then and there. You kind of have to, put it on hold for a little bit. So that was something that I was kind of dealing with a little bit too, and I'm not sure if other females have dealt with that either. I'm sure. But another big hurdle that I was, that we had been talking about, so, the times that Alex and I were seeing each other, when we were doing the long distance, is we were mostly, seeing each other on weekends. So, like, my thing was, so my room or apartment or whatever I was staying in was really neat. I'm kind of a neat freak. And then I would go to Alex's place, and it was very much like a bachelor, pad, and it's like, oh, like, I just want to, like, make the bed, do the laundry, like, all that stuff. But, like, obviously, if I was doing that, I wouldn't spend any time with Alex. So, and I think that's something that's kind of normal for relationships too. Is just, your different spaces are, different. So, when we had talked about like when we were going to be moving closer or even maybe moving in together, one thing was like we're seeing a snippet of the other person's life on the weekends, but like during the week, like, you know, if during the weekend we go out to eat and we're just relaxing and cuddling and whatever, it's all good. But then during the week we might go back to what we normally do and things like that. So I think one of the things I struggled with was when we would be moving in together, how would our everyday lives look like? Is Alex able to deal with me being kind of a little bit of a control freak, like things have to be neat, tidy, things like that? Is he going to be okay that I might not work out as much as he does? Things like that, because those are things that, when you're moving in, you talk about, and, your partner is able to observe, like, whoa, she, compared to early on in the relationship, like she might be really letting herself go, or he might, or, things like that. So just having those hard conversations about, really learning your partner and, because I guess we call it, peacocking early in the relationship. Like you make it look all like you're all put together and this, that, and the other thing, and then you get to where you're kind of out of the honeymoon stage and you're really learning, like, ooh, like, things like, oh, she went to go visit her mom, we're going to need extra ice cream in the fridge, or, things like that, where it's just like you learn more about the other person. So I think one of the struggles when we were doing long distance is just how we would make the adjustment to living together. Another thing was just not being able to see each other as much. So how Alex and I did it, so we were about 3 hours apart. So what we did was we alternated every other weekend, and then so I would go visit him the first week of the month, and like the first weekend of the month, and he would come visit me the third weekend of the month, and we alternated. But living in Minnesota, where we have snow 10 months out of the year, that was an issue, because if he had to be back for work, then there were some weekends where we just had to say it might not be worth it for you to come, which hurt, being early on in the relationship, because obviously you want to spend as much time with that person as you can, and we weren't necessarily able to do that. And yeah, so I think that was a struggle. That's something to this day that we say that we're happy that we don't have to deal with anymore, long distance. I know, something for me that was hard for the long distance was really being able to understand, like Alex's Asperger's. I know that was something that was hard for me. And the reason I say that is because, like, yes, on the weekend we could cuddle and we could do whatever, but I'm not really seeing his day-to-day routine. I'm not seeing how much, like me time he needs. I'm not seeing what he maybe needs to eat on a consistent basis, or what his schedule is. And for me, for finding out that, my boyfriend had Asperger's, I wanted to be able to be the best partner that I could and really understand his, kind of his, behaviors and habits and things that he did, so I could be a good partner for when we moved in together. So something that I struggled with when we were long distance, I just wasn't able to see those, activities and behaviors, and it made me nervous for when we were moving in together to see if I would be a good fit for him.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think Tori brings up a good point too, of like, I think for a successful relationship, both parties need to have that servitude mentality towards the other, and it's big and little things, because like right now she's doing a night class, and on Tuesday nights she has like a video class, like an in-person video lesson, and I will just bring her like a grilled cheese or hot chocolate or whatever, because I know if it was me, I would be like it's 5:30, I'm hungry, but I've got to do this class for the next hour and a half, and that sucks. So it's like I can have that kind of mentality of helping her out. So like it's little and big things. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think overall I'm happy that we're not having to do the long distance. I think we did that for like the first 3.5 years of our relationship.
Sure.
It was 3.5 years. But just, it's almost like when you move in with your partner, you're starting to almost learn how to date each other again. Because you're learning new things. Like, oh, he likes to leave sock piles like everywhere. Or like, oh, he doesn't like to do the dishes. Or, oh, she leaves puddles all over the floor when, we, have showers or whatever. Things like that. It's just like, and like Alex said, it's big things and it's little things. Like, oh, like, you name it. There's just things. But we almost had to learn how to date each other again and kind of figure those things out. And for me, I knew it was important to really learn Alex's routine to be able to help him with his Asperger's and things like that, because I know he likes a routine. He needs a schedule, and yeah, so it was important for me to learn those things.
Yeah. Like one thing that I know was a struggle early on, like when we would visit each other, being a fitness guy, I think food is important. And I remember getting frustrated about, like, I would be hungry, but Tori didn't have any food, or we were just, like, when I'm already hungry, going to the store to go grocery shopping, to cook, to then eat, and getting really frustrated with that whole process. So I started just bringing food for us to warm up and have. And she likes my cooking. And that's a whole other thing where we've been trying to expand my repertoire of recipes, because I can eat the same 5 things on a rotation or whatever, and she likes a variety. So that's something we're kind of growing together. But I was also going to say, like, so with the cooking example, like, and then she talked about with my bachelor pad, if things are messy and she wants to clean, like, people will kind of fall into whatever roles. And you might have it happen naturally, or you might need to have conversations about, I don't mind doing X, Y, and Z chore, and you can do A, B, and C chore, and just kind of see what's a fit. So, because I think Tori appreciates that I try to have food ready in the house. And
I do.
And it's interesting because, like, she doesn't like doing dishes by hand. Like, when we lived in places that didn't have a dishwasher, I would handle the dishes primarily, and then when we've had a dishwasher, she's like, it's no problem, I got this, leave it to me, boo. So, and I'm appreciative of that, because I can just deal with cooking and not have to do the other stuff. So, yeah. Does that kind of cover that, you think?
Yeah, I think, like I said, overall, I think we're excited to not be doing the long distance. I think there were things that we learned about each other doing long distance, but there wasn't anything that we learned about each other doing long distance that scared us off to not commit to, like, the full-on living together. I knew with Alex's Asperger's and change is something that's difficult. So just really wanted to make sure that it was something that we were both, comfortable with when we got to that step. Like trying to, like, plant those seeds early.
I remember when we were talking about moving in, when she first kind of pitched that idea to me, I had a lot of sleepless nights for, like, I want to say 2 months or so before we pulled the trigger.
And I think that's something just important to note about our relationship too, is whenever there's something I think about that would be, like, spontaneous and it's a bigger change, I, take a lot of time, analyzing that before I bring it up to Alex or before I say anything to Alex, because of the the change factor. So, other couples might say like, oh, I just made a spontaneous decision that we're going to, fly to Fiji, in a week. Whereas if I were to tell like something like that to Alex, he might say like, cool, but then he's like, like what, okay, like what, so it's just something that's kind of special about our relationship is just we really, like I really take the time to kind of analyze and see what he would be thinking. And, I don't think a lot of couples necessarily have that concern in the forefront of their brain. So it is something that's consistently on my mind. Even like marriage and kids or whatever, that's something that we talked about really early on. Maybe earlier than Alex was expecting, but, I'm just, making investments, want to know. So, and I think that's another good thing to bring up too. Just making kind of your needs and expectations of the relationship known. Like, what are you hoping to get out of this relationship? Because it's much easier to cut those ties if you need to at the beginning of the relationship versus when you're, kind of more invested and things like that.
Yeah, because then you're not, like, trying to convert somebody to match what you want because you never had that conversation, and now all of a sudden it's like, you're 3 years in and it's like, now I want kids, and we've never talked about that.
Yeah.
What?
I think it's important to not go in a relationship with an agenda for change, because if your agenda for a relationship is to change the person,
you're in for a world of hurt.
Then exactly, then it's
Yeah,
not going to be easy.
One thing you said about me is that I'm pretty predictable with, like, and that applies to my routine and also probably how I react to stuff.
Which I love. I love that Alex is predictable. And the reason for that is, if I ask Alex to do something, like if he can drop something off at the post office or whatever, and like I know he'll do it. That's just the kind of person that Alex is. But also, like, if Alex says, if he cooks, food on the weekend for us to have it for the week, I know Alex is going to do that. So for me, I love that he's predictable, because to me, the predictable part and the dependable part, like, kind of go hand in hand, and I really like that, because I'm not really somebody who likes surprises, so predictable for me is good. And I'm a planner. Like, I love to plan and organize things, so predictable for me is wonderful, because I can work with predictable, I can work with dependable. When it's spontaneous, that's the kind of stuff that throws me for a loop, and I don't know how to handle that. So I think Alex and I are a really good match in that respect too.
So, how do you think we've grown from being with each other? I mean, we've kind of covered it, but...
Yeah. That's a good question. I think how we've grown with being with each other is just we've learned how to be better partners for each other. And we've learned to really expand on our, communication and how we handle conflict. Because we're the two that each other sees the most. I mean, we're the ones who are doing the most interaction, the most conflict, the most conversation, we're it. So I think learning how to communicate better in a relationship, I think that's helped us to develop our relationships in other aspects, like develop our relationships with our parents or our siblings or our coworkers and things like that. So as we've grown as a couple, I think we've been able to kind of carry that over into other relationships. So you would ask how we kind of have grown as like a couple, but I think it's spilled over to how we've grown just as individuals. And that's carried over to other aspects in our life. And that's the thing I've noticed the most. and really like, because as we've been able to grow and develop, we've been able to, weed out things that we're not looking for, and are able to attract things that we are looking for, and, things like that. So I think that's been really important for not only our relationship, but for, all of our other relationships as well.
Yeah, like, I'm thinking about, like, and we've talked earlier about being with somebody that you can kind of be your authentic self with. And I think what I've noticed for myself is the true core authentic Alex, I'm closer to that person in a lot more aspects of life. So like my family's more on the, I don't know, like stoic or reserved side, or however you want to word that, and just kind of being more of myself, like injecting more of the fun. I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say, but like in the Mark Manson book, he talks called Models. He talks about authenticity is huge for being like a filter for whoever you're going to be with, because like we were talking about earlier, with if you know what the other person wants from the relationship, and you're communicating what you want and everything, like, and you are acting how you are, then there's not going to be those surprises, and you kind of know that you like that person because you know who they are. So, and the hard part is like, there's a Bill Cosby thing that talks about, like, you want to be yourself, but what if you're an asshole? Like, and that's where, like, for me at least, because I'm big on self-improvement, so that question of, but what if I'm not a good person comes up, and it's like, we've this whole podcast we've been talking about how we've kind of grown and changed, and like, because you should, I was gonna say, like, people grow and change just kind of naturally as they go through life. That may not necessarily be true for everybody, but because some people might just be really stuck, but I don't know.
I think with the different life events that you encounter, sometimes that'll help you mature quickly, or sometimes that can really, set things back. So people aren't, growing, and, everybody's growing and changing, but not everybody is growing and changing at the same pace. So, you had asked, like, what's, about our, our relationship growing and things like that. And I think one of my favorite things, and I told Alex even this morning, that our, the love and respect that we have for each other, like I said, our relationship is like a comfortable relationship, where it's like we kind of know what to expect from the other person. There's that respect, there's that love. It's just that comforting. It's not that super exciting, exhilarating, and not to say that it doesn't have its moments, but it's a comfortable love. And that's something I've always wanted with my husband is, I want him to be a partner for me, for us to kind of keep growing and, kind of expanding on our love and investing in it, and just having it be comfortable. Like, I know where Alex is as a person, and, his goals and dreams and things like that. And it's just really keeps my heart at peace to have that comfortable love. Because it's something that I've always wanted with a partner, so.
I think that's a good way to wrap it up, honestly. So, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah.
And thanks for tuning in, and check out the next episode. Thanks.